Good evening. I'm Michael Loomis, hanging out here with you in my virtual studio, otherwise known as my bedroom, at chewdigest.com. And it is Sunday. I can safely say it's Sunday because when I woke up this morning, I thought it was Monday. Somehow I had just passed right over a day altogether. Some days you fall back a day, but I don't think I've ever fallen forward a day and like skipped over one so bad in my life. I uh I got up this morning and I'm not sure if it was the sound of the traffic that made me feel like it was Monday versus Sunday, which is usually quiet as a cemetery, but I just something told me it was Monday and I was ready and raring to go. I have a regular networking event I go to on Mondays over at Long Beach City College uh, for the school I do go to, which is Arizona State University through their online program. And so I didn't say anything to my mom, who I live with, and I got up, got ready to go, went out on my walk this morning, but instead of going like 5.5 miles like I've been doing for the last 2 weeks while I'm off school, I uh, I got back in just under 2 miles or about 40 minutes, and she's like, "What are you doing home so soon?" I said, "Well, I gotta get to school," and she was like, "What? No, it's Sunday." I was like, "What? Wait, what?" I go over and look at the calendar and I'm thinking about it and I'm like, "Oh, you're right." And it was really strange because all of a sudden I now have had what feels like an extra day. Would it have felt the same way had I woke up realizing it was Sunday morning first thing right off the bat? I don't know. I don't know, but this day felt different to me, and it felt like a gift almost. Um, so I just I kind of intentionally took it easy. I got a few things done. Not much of anything productive other than just to kind of sit back in gratitude and realize, uh, just even more so, that I have a feeling we are, especially here in the United States, in places like California and whatnot, we get so tied up in, trying to achieve something to be rather than being, how do I say this? Rather than being happy where you're at, always striving to have more. I know a lot of people that spend a lot of time working for retirement to find out when they get there within 2 or 3 years they're dead, and that thing they thought they were going to get to live and enjoy and have a nice big fat pension for a lot of years, they didn't get it. And I'm not, I don't want to be that guy. I have two beautiful daughters. I have two beautiful ex-wives. I have uh, a grandson now and two beautiful granddaughters. I have I just, all these relationships are amazing, and I have a lot of other good family too. And it just, why aren't we? I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I know if we don't work, we don't eat, right? I get that. Um, if you don't fish, if you don't hunt, you don't gather or whatever, you're not going to eat. You're going to go hungry. Some work needs to be done, but the question is how much. And I really do have a feeling we are living in a world where we have, for convenience sake, allowed the industrial revolution to redefine who we are as humans and how we spend our time. And the what we would call the age of industry is now over. I mean, it's pretty much over. There are still some remnants of it that stick around, but the reality is we are still stuck in a mindset that we need to work and spend 40 or more hours per week doing whatever it is that we do, when in reality is that it's probably something much less than that. And thankfully, due to technology, our work lives are beginning to shrink back down to something from more what looked like the pre-industrial age. However, this time we have a lot more luxuries that they didn't have back then. I mean, even the poorest of people today are living better than the kings of just a few hundred years ago. I mean, I hate to say it, but even if you think you're poor now, I mean, don't get me wrong, people that are sleeping on the streets, that is not what I'm talking about. But if you have a roof over your head, a a place to sleep, clothing, and access to medical care, even if you think you're struggling, even if you are, on government assistance, guess what? You are living a life that is better than most everybody that lived before 200 years ago. And that's pretty wild to think of. And that's because so many of the things that in past centuries cost so much, or that they were so rare that they had such a high price, now these things are just common. I mean, to think that people, just 2,000 years ago, they used to get paid in salt. And that's where we get the word salary, because sal, S-A-L, is probably Latin for um, salt. And now you can go buy a 50-pound bag of it at Home Depot for $7. And that's wild to think about, because I also look at a whole music library that would have contained all the world's music back in the 1990s would have cost so much money, and now we have it for free on YouTube. Free doesn't cost us anything. um If you want to modify it a little bit more, yeah, you can pay for Spotify or Apple Music if you're a student for $5 a month. But still, that's cheap. And so it's not that, we with artificial intelligence, if you want to call it that, go right ahead. With technology the way that it is today, we are very quickly coming to a point where everything is going to start getting a lot cheaper. And therefore, a lot of what we call poverty is going to go away, because now the things that used to cost a lot more are going to cost a lot less. The biggest one, is something that's going to be probably a pretty sore subject for most people, but the cost of housing. For a lot of people, if when the floor drops out of that, that's going to be great. For those who have that house or real estate as an investment, it's going to be a sad day for them. But nonetheless, overall, when it comes to mankind, it's going to be a positive. So I don't know. I mean, my thoughts on the subject of real estate as a way to make a sustained income, you might want to rethink that narrative and change that part of your story, because I kind of have a feeling it's going to go away at some point. Because right now, the thing, especially here in the Western world, that has made real estate something that is worthwhile investing in is a bunch of magic and woo woo and massaging of the way we understand the valuation of housing and houses and front doors and doorbells. There has been an artificial inflation in the cost of living that has caused an artificial deflation in the quality of life of a lot of people. Anyways, enough of that. I did have a couple of interesting questions I asked myself while I was out walking today, and I did not prepare much about that. Nuance in human relationship will matter more in the future. Maybe I'll get to that tomorrow. But I wanted to talk a little bit tonight, before I take off here, because I want to keep things a little bit shorter. Is this idea of diet, and I know I talk about this quite a bit because I'm a student of applied nutrition and health, and the more I study nutrition and health, and I don't look at those two things as two different subjects. I don't look at nutrition as something as simple as just food, but everything that our body needs at the cellular level, not just what kind of, food do I put in my mouth, but what are all the things that my body needs to function optimally. And there are certain things that I think are non-negotiable. One of those nutritional needs is walking every day, just movement of large skeletal muscles. Grabbing some weights and pushing them up in the air, curling, pressing, pulling, walking, squatting. You got to use them or you're going to lose them, and you don't want to lose them as you get older. If you're going to be out walking, don't walk. Try to avoid walking in the mall or on a treadmill unless you have to, and walk on uneven ground. Ground that is not stable, because the reality is that builds up the muscles of stability that help you keep from falling down. You want to have some instability in the ground you're walking on. It's just, you got to be a little bit more careful so you don't trip over something, but in general it's going to help you with your balance. So walking, exercise, you got to sleep right. You got to get at least for most people, and I would just say for everybody, 8 hours of sleep at night. My recommendation, even though I'm not the best at following it, is be laying down in bed with the lights very, very low, 9 hours and 36 minutes before sunrise, and just go from there. Um, so sleep, exercise, obviously hydration is important. But when it comes to food, let's just call it what it is. What most people think about is things like, uh, what do I eat? Is it okay to eat meat? What kinds of meat? Do I need to be vegan or vegetarian or fruitarian? I mean, there are a lot of people out there that that would like to suggest that humans are frugivores. In other words, we are created to eat fruit only and maybe some leafy greens like romaine lettuce or iceberg lettuce. And I tried that for a while, and you know what, dude? It felt good if I felt hydrated. Don't get me wrong, but I was eating all day long. I mean, it was insane how much time you had to dedicate to eating. And then there was all the pooping. I mean, it was a full time job almost. And it's convenient for sure. When all you gotta do is throw some apples and some bananas and some oranges in a bag and walk away. You've got everything. But if you end up in a family situation at a restaurant, you're going to be the strange guy that's having to explain himself at the end of the table. Everybody's going to want to start asking, well, where are you getting your protein? And then if you go to the other end of the spectrum and you're a carnivore, people are saying, well, where are you getting fiber? And I'm now, after years of trying every single diet and hearing every single question, and now studying applied nutrition and health at the university level. um, I can tell you that what I'm relatively certain that, with a great level of certainty, that science has done a pretty good job figuring out that we are what you would call omnivores, generalists, when it comes to our dietary intake. That the human body, over all of its generations, however long that is, has developed in such a way that its physiology, it's I take that back, its anatomy has generalized to the point where humans can eat all manner of things, from just steak, all the way to just grapes for a month straight. And guess what? Both are going to turn out fine at the end of the month. You might be really, really bored, but you can do it. I mean, our bodies, by chance or by design, have adapted so well that you could literally starve yourself of certain specific nutrients that the human body needs for a good solid month. And your body's going to be very conservative and hold on to what it needs to. So we're all good there. My only thing that I truly do believe that you could say is more of an ideology is that I think we would best be served to be consuming whole foods only. Avoid foods that have been processed outside of your kitchen. I mean, if you can buy all of your ingredients that are whole, meaning the way Mother Nature or God created them is how they enter your kitchen. And then you can do pretty much whatever you want once you're inside your kitchen with your whole foods. That's what our body needs. Our body, otherwise, I believe, according to my studies, is going to have a harder time processing through the foods that it does not recognize as whole foods. In other words, hyper processed foods. One example of that, like, say, for example, at a restaurant eating out, that'd be a good example of whole food, um, would be In and Out. One of their hamburgers is pretty much plain straight ingredients. Is their cheese really cheese, or is it American cheese? I think it's American cheese. Um, I would probably choose not to eat French fries because they are fried in grease, vegetable oils. If they're cooked in lard, or tallow, I might consider that because they're tasty. But I would treat that as like a holiday dessert. Um, Again, I try to avoid things that are overcooked, and that's really my point. Is that overcooking is the processing that leads to ultimately expressions of disease in our soft tissues, which you want to avoid. Trust me, I've had my fair share by 53 years of age, and honestly, I consider myself pretty lucky compared to a lot of people. I've There's been a number of people in my life that have passed on that I went to high school with or grade school with that died way too young, and I just I'm not going to be that guy. Now, one thing I will tell you is that I do not any longer believe that there is a diet that's going to get you further down the road. In other words, that's a diet that's going to by itself get you to 120 years of age. No, there's a whole host of things that I mentioned earlier, which is the right kind of exercise, the right kind of sleep, um, not living a life full of stress and anxiety, but also the right kinds of foods and, of course, hydration. But other than the essentials that our body can't synthesize on its own, things like vitamin C, electrolytes, um, certain what we call vitamins. Once all those things are met, however long we're going to live for, that's set in the flesh, set in stone in a sense. Um, are there certain things you can do to get a little bit further down the road that will tip that clock in your favor? Yeah, probably. Uh, I I I still am waiting for our software technology to get a little bit better to help us research those answers that would better favor or tilt our longevity of years forward, which I hope will be the case. But in the meantime, what I can say is everything that I've just spoken to you about is the best way to appreciate what I call health span, not lifespan, but health span. In other words, what is going to be the quality of the life that you have while you are here, living here, while you're alive? Do you want to, even if you're amount of years and trips around the sun are limited to 80. Even if I'm only going to live to be 80 years of age, I would want to make sure that that last night that I went to bed before I fell asleep, that I had no apparent signs of disease, no need for a walker, no need for a wheelchair, no need for a caregiver. That's the goal, because nobody knows the day or the hour, nobody knows how long they have to live. The question is, what do you want to experience on the way, on the journey of life? And so for me, I want to be as resilient as possible. I want to know that if I do have an accident somewhere along the way, that my body's going to have the strength to be able to recover and still be able to be robust. And so I've had to shift my thinking in that a little bit. Can I live to be 120 years of age? I sure hope so. I want to fix that problem more than anybody. But I think more than anything, what we need to do is appreciate the time that we have, be thankful and thankful every day. Start learning to use the words thank you more and more every day, and see what it does for you in your outlook on life. Gratitude. There's nothing better than that. Uh, for you, it's healthy. I'm pretty certain I can say that with all certainty. And I know for me, I'm really starting to focus more on that in my life. But anyways, so yeah, whether it's a head of broccoli or a tomahawk steak, that juicy ribeye with that big old rib hanging off the side of it. I've never even had one. But which one's better for you? Personally, myself, I think both. Steam your broccoli, enjoy it. Don't eat it raw. I really don't. Yeah. Mm-mm. I think pretty much every vegetable needs to be cooked unless you're eating gentle leafy greens like romaine or uh, iceberg lettuce or fruit. You're good. The only other recommendation: avoid plant toxins, avoid oxalate, and the rest of your life you should feel pretty darn good. And you may be able to, like some people, get away with just one meal a day with a few other things added in around that. Um, what I do know is you do want to have caloric and fat intake at least over a 12-hour span. If you're like me and you're lactase persistent, in other words, the opposite of lactose intolerant, you know, start off your day. I mean, for me, I start off my day with a glass of orange juice, that big, filled up to there with orange juice. Um, I then, after I get back from my walk, I have 12 ounces of whole milk. Most of the time, I add a little bit of whole cream to that to give it a little bit of extra fat. Um, and then tonight, here, probably in about 45 minutes, I'll have some more milk again, uh, just because I do have a lot of faith in Dr. Walter Longo and his longevity diet, and he makes it pretty clear that 12 hours is the best window when it comes to eating as far as its benefits for longevity. And so that's what I do. Anyways, that's it for tonight. I will see you guys back here tomorrow, most likely. It's going to be a little bit of a busy day, considering I have to look over a lot of my syllabus stuff that I'm going to get, since they open all that stuff up in the middle of the night tonight for the next 7.5 weeks. Not sure I'm going to be able to make videos every day because 7.5 weeks of a lot of schoolwork is what I've got in front of me, and then I got a whole summer off. That being said, I'm Michael Loomis checking out here from the Chew Digest virtual studio on YouTube, and I'll see you guys back here soon. Have a good night.